"Nora, hurry up and clean up the storeroom," shouted Patricia, the manager of the restaurant where Nora was working as a cleaner. "Okay, I'll just finish up here and—" But Patricia didn't let her finish. "You should be quicker in the kitchen, but you're like a slob and klutz. You've been hired out of charity, and you're working through your sleeves." These unfair words brought tears to Nora's eyes. "It's not true. I do my best to get everything done as quickly as possible." Patricia became even angrier at Nora. "Are you going to snap at me? If I wanted to, you'd be fired in a heartbeat. Understand?" Nora nodded, gathered her buckets and rags silently and moved toward the storeroom. She was insanely tired at this job. It was so hard that on some nights she woke up with an ache in her arms. The owner economized on the staff, and on the days when there was an event in the restaurant, Nora was simply devastated. Her job was not only to wash the floors. Nora had to clean everything around the restaurant, help peel and wash vegetables, be on hand for any purpose. Nora's salary, however, was very good for a cleaner. This was the reason she was willing to put up with everything. In addition, there were other advantages. First, the restaurant was a 5-minute walk from her home, and secondly, she could eat there for free. This was the most important plus. The thing was that Nora tried to save up for her dream as much as possible. If you looked at Nora from the right, she was an ordinary, even pretty girl. But if you looked at her from the left, you could see a huge birthmark almost all over her cheek. Sometimes she let her hair down on that side, and it was not so frightening to people around her, but Nora was terribly embarrassed by this, and did not even go to college after school. Because of this birthmark, she could never get a proper job, and because of it, according to Nora, she ended up in an orphanage. So Nora's main dream was to get rid of that birthmark. "Nora!" The girl heard Patricia's angry shout, and from unexpectedness, she even jumped up and banged her head painfully on the shelf. "Haven't you finished here yet? I don't understand why they pay you such a salary. There's knee-deep snow outside, you know. It's a wedding day, so everything has to be perfect." "I have just a little left to clean up the closet, and I'll go straight outside," said Nora, and Patricia walked away with a smirk. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Rosemary was looking at herself in the mirror. She could not believe that today she was really getting married. The girl smiled at her reflection in the mirror and spun around. The wedding dress rustled quietly around her legs. "Am I really the prettiest?" she asked, and her father, Sherwood, smiled affectionately. "Not just the prettiest, but the most gorgeous. And that's out of the question. Haven't you forgotten that you became the beauty queen of the university?" Of course, Rosemary remembered it perfectly. She should, because there she had met William, who would become her husband today. William was not a student at the university. He was a sponsor, a successful businessman. Like a boy, fell in love with a young winner. Rosemary at first was wary of the rich man's advances, but William was persistent. He showed himself as a reliable, calm, and at the same time strong and firm man. He was mature, which was very different from her peers. Having realized what kind of man William was, Rosemary allowed herself to fall in love too. They were a beautiful couple, and how happy were Rosemary's parents. Her mother did not get tired of repeating, "You're so clever, dear, such a profitable match." But Rosemary only laughed back and told her mother that she would marry William, even if he did not have a penny. "But that would have been foolish. You need to value yourself," objected her mother seriously. Of course, Rosemary didn't like her mother valuing everything with money, but she had always been like that. Her father, on the contrary, was a gentle, kind, and unselfish man, and Rosemary loved him for that and pitied him very much. It seemed to her that he had never contradicted his wife, although he held a senior position and was entirely different at work. One day, Rosemary saw him reprimanding a subordinate. To be honest, if she had not seen it with her own eyes that it was her father, she would never have believed it. Arriving to the restaurant a little early, Rosemary's mother, Eleanor, walked between the tables one more time and finally nodded contentedly to Patricia. "You have prepared everything perfectly." Patricia smiled. "Of course. How could it be otherwise?" Eleanor looked at the administrator meaningfully. "The guests will be arriving in half an hour, and I want everything to be all right from here on out." Patricia tried to assure Eleanor that she had everything under control, and Eleanor finally smiled. She was pleased that a woman was so flattering. Yes, she had gone the hard way to what she now had, but thanks to her daughter's marriage, Eleanor planned to go one step higher. All her life, Eleanor had despised people who were not perfect. She was convinced that a person should be perfect in everything, whether he was a housewife or a big boss. Eleanor went to a large mirror, examined herself. Not a drop of fat, an ideal figure, perfect makeup and hair. Her husband wasn't perfect in every way. If it were not for her, he would hardly have achieved anything at all. Suddenly, Eleanor heard car horns. The woman smiled and went to meet the guests. 2 hours later, a disgruntled Patricia approached Nora. "Hey, there's a broken bottle of champagne in the hall. You need to clean it up." Nora grabbed a dustpan, bucket and broom and was just about to enter the hall when Patricia called out to her again. "Cover your face with something or you'll scare the guests. Who on earth thought of hiring you to work in such a decent place?" Nora clenched her teeth so she wouldn't cry, and with a familiar gesture, she hid her birthmark behind the strands. Cautiously, making her way between the guests, Nora heard the announcement that the bride would be throwing the bouquet at the moment. Wow, I'd love to see the bride throw the bouquet too, and she is, as the waiter said, beautiful. The groom must be from some rich people. They had such an expensive wedding, thought Nora, and noticing that Patricia was discussing something with the bartender, she stood on tiptoes and raised her head to watch the throwing of the cherished bouquet. The bride stood with her back to the guests while the presenter was counting out loudly, 1, 2, 3. The bouquet flew up. All the single ladies rushed to where it was supposed to fall, but the bouquet, catching one of the chandeliers, changed its flight path and fell directly on Nora. She automatically grabbed it and froze. Everyone around her gasped and stared at her. Suddenly, someone of the guests said, "No way! Look, she looks like 2 peas in a pod, like Rosemary. This must be another practical joke." Nora heard nothing. She only saw Patricia approaching her, white with anger. The poor cleaner was horrified. She even dropped the bouquet and was about to run into the back room, but someone caught her by the arm. Nora turned around. The bride and groom were standing in front of her. Rosemary looked surprised, and the groom's mouth dropped open in amazement. And there was much to be surprised about. It was as if Nora were looking at herself, only with makeup and without the ugly birthmark. "Who are you?" asked the bride loudly, and there was silence in the hall. "I'm Nora, but I'm sorry I have to go to work." "Work? Are you out of your mind? Do you realize that it's impossible for 2 people to be with the same face?" At that moment, a pale Eleanor ran up to them. "Rosemary, let's go. It's your wedding. But you were making some proceedings here." But Rosemary pulled out her hand and refused to go anywhere. "Mum, I'm not going anywhere. It seems to me that if anyone can clarify anything, it's only you and Daddy." Eleanor grabbed her daughter's arm again, but then Sherwood's voice came through clearly. "Eleanor, but you told me the other girl was dead." Nora slowly shifted her gaze from Eleanor to Sherwood. She finally began to make sense of what was happening. Tears flowed from her eyes. She looked painfully straight into Eleanor's eyes. "Are you the one who abandoned me because I was born ugly? Don't worry about it. I'm not going to rush to my relatives. Just now at least I know the face of the one who gave birth to me and then abandoned." Nora shouted and ran out of the hall, knocking over a bucket of water on the way. She grabbed her jacket and left the restaurant, choking back tears. Nora sobbed all night until she was exhausted, and then she suddenly realized that nothing had happened. She had suspected before that her parents had abandoned her because of that birthmark, and now she just knew who they were. But the pain was she wasn't born alone, and the fact that she was now out of a job. Nora didn't notice how she fell asleep. She was awakened by a persistent ring on the doorbell. The girl opened and saw Rosemary and her husband on the doorstep. "Hello, may we come in?" Nora stepped back in silence. She had no idea why these people had come, but she really hoped they would leave sooner. William sat down in a chair and Rosemary remained standing. "Nora, I understand everything you're feeling right now, although I can't even imagine how this could happen at all. I can't believe that my parents could... for me, my world collapsed yesterday." Rosemary wiped away her tears, and William took her hand and continued for his wife. "Anyway, Nora, my wife, and I will not leave you. We have money. We'll pay for any treatment. Your friends at the restaurant told us that you're collecting money for that." Nora did not have time to answer because the doorbell rang again. "I think I know who it is," said Rosemary, and went to open the door. She came back already with her father. Sherwood had aged 10 years overnight. He walked over to Nora, looked at her for a long time, then said, "I'm sorry, daughter. If only I had known. When your mother was in labour, I was on a business trip. I was sent to the other side of the world for 3 months. I wanted to say no, but Eleanor insisted because it was a big step in my career. She promised me that she would somehow manage without me. And when I came back, well, she said that this sometimes happens with twins." A month passed. Nora was lying in the clinic, waiting for surgery. The doctor warned that it was a very complicated and not a quick process, but Nora was up for anything. Her father and Rosemary called her every day. Sometimes William picked up the phone and asked if she needed anything. In general, Nora felt very strange. She was used to being alone, and now she had so many close and caring people to help her in everything. The door creaked open quietly. Nora turned her head and froze. Her mother entered the room. When you were born, I thought my life was ruined. I imagined how everyone would point the finger at you and me, how our family would be discussed. And I wanted the perfect family. I couldn't do otherwise. I would have gone crazy. For a long, long time, I couldn't sleep at night, but then I convinced myself that I did the right thing. Now everything that was perfect, that I had built for years, has collapsed like it was nothing. I'm judged even by those whom I might say I spoon-fed. And then, why did I need all this? I understand that you don't like to see me, and I won't bother you. But let me come and see you once in a while. I can't visit you with my husband. We have nothing else in common anymore. Rosemary has turned her back on me. You see, all I have now is you, the daughter I had once betrayed. Forgive me, though I understand that such things cannot be forgiven." The woman stood up and walked to the door. There was no more proud posture, no more head held high. At the door, she turned around, and Nora said quietly that she would welcome her visits. There seemed to be a faint light in the woman's eyes, and she smiled weakly. "Thank you,"